G'day Trailblazers, my name is Cam, and for today's video, I'm going to take you through how to upload your customer or business data from your desktop or your FTP location into a data extension in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. To show you how to import your own data from your desktop or FTP into a data extension, you're going to need two things. First of all, a data extension to import the data into, and secondly, some data to import. Now I've gone ahead on my GitHub and I've created some sample data for us to use today. I'll put the link to this in the description below. You can navigate to my GitHub and go to my samples set here. I have some sample rows.csv. If you click into this file, you'll see that there are 13 rows of data and one header. You can see for yourself, it's just a sample row set of information with some first name, role, email address, and email opt-in flags. Now to use this data for today, what we're going to do is click on the raw button here. By clicking on this, it shows the raw CSV data, just like this. We can then right-click on our page and go Save As. By clicking Save As, we can now save this CSV file to our local device. I'm going to save it into my files to import here, and I'll go Save. With that file saved, we can now go and create the data extension that we have to build inside Marketing Cloud. So back over in Marketing Cloud, I've navigated to the Email Studio. Under Email Studio, the email item here. Once it's loaded, I'm then going to Subscribers and to my data extensions. Now my data extensions view, I do have some folders here on the left-hand side. I've created, of course, a public folder which currently has 0 items, and it's here we're going to make the data extension for today. Now, of course, you can have your own data structure. I'm just going to use this one for my example. Now, to create a new data extension, we click on the Create button on the top right-hand side. We go Create. We're going to choose to create a brand new standard data extension so that we can store our custom fields to storing our data. We're going to go OK, and we can start to type in the information for our brand new data extension. The name for this one's going to be Sample Rows. We're going to make sure that this Sample Rows data extension is able to be sent to, because I will be using this for sending some emails to later on. And of course, we do want to be able to test it as well to send tests to. So I'll tick the Sendable and Testable, and then we'll click on the Next button. Now, the data retention policy allows you to specify that this data in the data extension will be removed over time. But as records are added, we'll also have them drop off after a period of days or otherwise. This is going to be customer data, so we don't want to delete this data over time. It's not going to be records or transaction data, so we'll leave the retention settings off for this one. We'll go to our next screen by clicking on the Next button. Now here we can specify the fields of our data extension. If we jump back into my GitHub page, we can see for ourselves the fields in this sample data. We have the ID field, the first name field, the role field, and so on. I can see pretty clearly that the record information here, the data type for these fields, is going to be text for the ID, obviously text for first name and role. The email address, of course, is an email address. The join date is a date. And our opt-in flag here is a Boolean true or false. So I can now go back through our data extension and recreate these values. Now, if you have this on a desktop file or an FTP file for yourself, you can, of course, open your file in Notepad or in Excel and check out those file headers for yourself. For today, I can just easily copy the file header names here, go back into my data extension and paste in the name will be the first field. Now the length is important as a text field. I have to make sure I specify a length that is long enough to make sure all the text will go in. I checked this out for myself. This is definitely only about 20 or 30 characters long, so 50 for a text length is just fine. Now additionally, the ID field in this data is a unique key. It's a business key or a customer key, which is important to my data set, and it will in fact be the primary key of this data extension. So I'm going to tick the primary key box here as well. Moving on to the next field, I go back into my GitHub. Our next one is first name. So I copy our first name, paste the name in, the text here, and how long is the first name going to be? Well, again, no one here is too long, so I'll leave it as 50 as the default. Next one down is role. Move back over here and do role as the next one. Again, 50 characters should be just fine. Next one is the email address. Now for email address, if I go in and paste email address as my name, I'll change my data type from text to email address. This is pretty important. It does then tell Marketing Cloud that this data in this field will be an email address. And so we'll check the data that you put into this field, make sure it conforms to the standard email address format. Now for this one, of course, our first name and role could be nullable. We may have some customers that don't have a first name or a role, but the email address we definitely don't want to be nullable. It must have some data in there, so we'll leave this box unticked. But we don't want to tick primary key, because if we did that, it may make that field unique, which means if we have duplicate records or people who share the same email address, it may not let them import if we ticked a primary key and if we unticked our ID. So we'll leave both these two boxes unticked for now. Moving back onto our field set, 2 more to go. Our join date, of course, is going to be a date. So I'll jump down here. Join date will be a date type. We can leave all these blank as they are. Moving along to our last one is the email opt-in. I'll copy that field, go back down here, paste our field in, and this one's a Boolean field, true or false. And we'll leave this one also as not nullable. There must be a value for true or false. With all that built in, there's one last thing to do. We have to tell Marketing Cloud how this data relates to our subscribers for sending purposes. So we are going to use this ID field as our customer key, our subscriber key inside Marketing Cloud. So what we have to do now is say that the ID field is going to relate back to our subscribers. So we choose the ID field, saying that the ID relates to our subscribers on subscriber key. This will be a subscriber key value. That all done, we can now press the create button to create our data extension. And a second later, there is our brand new data extension ready to go. So we now have a data extension and some sample data to import. So let's go through the few ways we can use to import data into Marketing Cloud. First and foremost, we can use Email Studio and press the import button against our data extension here. If I scroll across to the right-hand side, I can see the import button. I can press that button and I can choose to import a file from my desktop or from the FTP by choosing these 2 options here. My computer, of course, being my current computer, the FTP being the remote FTP server. For now, I'm going to choose the My Computer option and choose to browse these files. When I choose Browse, I can navigate to my files to import where I downloaded that previous file, and there is my sample rows. I can click on that file and go Open. Now this file is not compressed, so I won't click the compressed button. It is a CSV, a comma separator values file, so the delimiter, the separator for this file, will be a comma. If it was a tab or other delimiter, I could choose those options here. Now, because I have exported this data in the Australian date format, and so for you people overseas who are listening to this video, make sure you choose the English Australia import type to make sure you do download the files in the correct structure. If you see here, the join date is day, month, year structured, so you do have to make sure you conform to that import type, or the import date format, which is the day, month, year format. If the import type here, we have a few options. To add an update means we are going to leave the existing data that's in the data extension, add some new records, and change existing. Add will, of course, only add new records, and it will not modify existing records, while the update only will not add new records and only update matched existing records. The overwrite function here allows us to delete all previous records in that data extension and replace them with the contents of the file that we are uploading. Now for today, I could choose to add only, add an update, or overwrite. Since the update function, there's 0 records currently in that data extension, so it wouldn't work. But for this one, I'm going to choose to overwrite. It's the safest one to use when you have no existing data. Now, for our last 2 options, are we going to skip rows in the import file that have bad data? Well, yes, we are. I'm pretty sure there's no bad data, but if there was, we want to skip those rows just in case. And is there a double quote text qualifier? We check our data out for ourselves. On our raw button here, I'm pretty sure there's no double quotes. No, there isn't. So we do not need to tick that box in case there was a quote delimiter. Now you can check that for yourself, of course, in your Excel or text file if you are using quotes. Some systems, when you click export, will append those double quotes to your text to qualify it for you. But with our 2 checkboxes there checked, our skip, and then of course not checked for our quotes, we'll click on next to configure our mapping. Now at this point, because we have uploaded a file, it's going to read the header file for us from our sample rows.csv and produce those header fields here. We can map them directly. Now the good news is, because we copied the same header names from the original file into our data extension, they're going to match perfectly. So we can choose the map by header row function here, which means that ID will map directly to ID, email address to email, and so on and so forth. This is a great option to use because that way there is less manual maneuvering you have to do to map your file in. Now, if you had to change the name of the file, for example, if the original file had a typo, or rather than saying join date, it said date of join or something different, you may have to use the map by ordinal, which is a numerical matching piece. So the first column will match to ID, the second to first name, and so on and so forth. Or you may have to map manually to manually choose which fields are mapped to which data extension fields. Again, for today we are lucky because they are matching fields, so I can choose the first option here. We are mapping ID to ID, and so on and so forth. With that, we can see there's also going to be 13 rows of data found in this file. We know that's correct because we checked out our data earlier, and our data in GitHub showed us that there is 14 in total with 1 header row, so 13 rows of data. Back into our file, we're now looking pretty good, so I'm going to click on Next to review it. And yes, we're going to import our CSV into our data extension using our comma separated values, the Australian date format, overwriting, skipping bad data, and we are looking pretty good. So we'll go import. And perfect, the import has started. So we'll go close, and hopefully we can now click on the folder again to refresh it on the left-hand side here. Refreshing our folder, and it's processing. Perfect, so our file has been uploaded and has been loaded into that data extension right now. I'll try and refresh it one more time. Perfect, and there we are. Our 13 records have now been uploaded into our data extension. We can check it out for ourselves by clicking on the blue name of the data extension, loading the information up, and there it is there. Jump into our records tab, and hopefully we see, perfect, there is our data, all 13 records uploaded. Now you may also notice on this screen, on the records screen of our data extension, we can also choose to import from this screen. If I click on the import button, you'll see exactly the same interface. We can choose to upload a file from our computer or our FTP. What I will do now though is go through the FTP process. Before I do, let's clean out this data so we can re-import it again. So go cancel. You can see here on the records screen all the way to the right hand side is our clear data button. Now be very careful here. This will of course delete the data in this data extension. So I'll go clear data for now, give us this nice warning, can't be undone. And of course we will be just removing our sample data, so I'm okay to remove it. We'll go okay. It's going to clear out those 13 records for us, and there we are, back to 0 records. Go back into our folder here on the top left hand side. We can now see there are 0 records in that data extension. So now let's try and upload some files from our FTP. Okay, so I've loaded up my FTP server on the Marketing Cloud account, and I can see for myself my usual file sets, my FTP export, import, reports, and trigger automation folders inside the Marketing Cloud FTP. And if you're not sure how to do your FTP setup, I do have some videos which I'll link in the description below so you can get to this point. But for now, I want to try and upload my file into my import folder on the Salesforce Marketing Cloud FTP so I can use the FTP import option to load my sample rows data into my data extension. So I have here my sample rows CSV inside my import folder. I can see here from the remote location, I've got import. And I can then drag and drop my sample file into this folder. I can check it out for myself, make sure it's all loaded and there correctly. And hopefully we'll see, yep, sample rows, perfect, inside my import folder. Can go back one level and just make sure that there's nothing on that one. Go into import, yep, definitely there in my import folder. So now I can jump back into Marketing Cloud and use the import function in the FTP options there to import my sample rows CSV. So once more back in Marketing Cloud, and we'll jump into this data extension once more, and let's go to Records, and we'll use the FTP import option. So over in Records, we'll choose to import. And this time I'm going to choose to import from FTP. Now it's really important that we chose to put that file inside the FTP import folder, because by default, that's where it's going to search. You have to also make sure that we do put the file name in exactly correct. It is case sensitive. So it was sample with a capital S, and rows with a capital R.csv. And also note that if you do have a very large file to import, you can only use your desktop upload function for files up to 20 megabytes. As you can see here from the warning, if it's over 20 megabytes, you have to use the FTP option. So since we are going to try it out today, let's show you how it all works. Just as before, it is a CSV, so we are going to keep it as comma delimited, the Australian date format, and of course for good measure, we'll choose the overwrite function, skipping bad data, and we are not going to respect double quotes as there are none to worry about. We'll then move into our next configuration, which is our mapping. Now, as long as we typed the name in correctly, it'll move on to this screen. If the name was incorrect, it'll tell us they could not find the file. Quickly show you how that looks. So sample rows, and I'll put 2 S's, for example, and I'll go next. It's going to say, oh, sorry, couldn't find that file. It is going to look inside the import folder in your FTP, so make sure your file exists in the import folder. Close that now, change the name back to its correct file name and case, and go next. And of course, here it is again. Now this time, I'm going to map manually and show you that it's all mapped up here. So for example, if I didn't assign these 2 last ordinals here, it would in fact show that I could say to map the first name field in my sample rows to the ID field in my data extension. And of course, I don't want to do that. I do want to map the first name to first name and the role to role, just like that. And I'll go next, make sure it's all mapped up. Again, I'll check my settings. It's all looking good. I can choose to now import that file. Now, once again, it's going to do its loading piece here and say it's successfully started the import. Perfect. I'll go close. go back to my folder, I should see that there we go, it's already done. All 13 records are already been inserted from the FTP directly into the data extension. Jump back in here and go to records, and hopefully all 13 with no gaps. Perfect. All right, so now we've covered off the Email Studio, ways to import from your desktop and FTP. Let's now go to the next option, which is using Contact Builder. So to do this, we're going to navigate to our app selector at the top left-hand side here, scroll all the way across to our Audience Builder and down to our Contact Builder. Now in Contact Builder, we're going to navigate to our Data Extensions window so you can use the import function across our data extension. To do this, we're going to move our tab across from our Data Designer all the way to our Data Extensions. And once this file loads here, we're going to go to our Data Extensions, expand Data Extensions, and locate the folder where we have our sample rows data extension. And here it is. Now I've gone ahead and already cleaned out those previous 13 records so we can start from scratch once more. So to do this, let's go ahead and open up our sample rows data extension. You can see straight away it's a very similar interface with a few small differences. What we are going to do is import our data. So I'll go to our import button just here, go import, and we can choose from our two options to import in our data extension or to create an import definition for later use. Well, we want to import things right now, so we'll choose the first option here and go OK. Now on this screen, again, very similar to our previous one that we did in Email Studio with a few small differences. Again, the same limitations, so we cannot upload a file greater than 20 megabytes in size from our desktop. We must use the FTP option for those larger files. Now in our file reference here, if we don't touch anything, it wants us to upload a file from our desktop, or we can change the source to upload a file from our file location, aka the FTP, or we can choose to upload from a different data extension, that is moving data from one data extension into another. For now though, let's choose to upload from our desktop, so we'll simply choose the Choose File option. You can see here my sample rows, click on that and go Open, and there it is. There is our CSV, comma delimited, with our date format. Now date format of course is not just English, we want English Australia, so I'll scroll down to our English section here, and it's going to be English Australia. Perfect. Now for our destination, of course, it has pre-chosen our current data extension, the sample rows, so we'll leave that as it is. Then we'll see in our import settings, of course, we have our 4 options as usual. I'm going to choose Overwrite. We'll keep on skipping bad data. Don't have to respect anything and don't have to normalize our locale as there is no SMS data in this import. With that, I can go Next. We can then configure our mapping. Now, the good thing here again, same names, so we'll leave it as the map by header row. I'll then go Next and we'll check our records here, all looking good. So we'll go Finish. So I'm going to go ahead and make this import for us. Now we do not want to go and create an import definition at this stage. I'm going to show you a third way to do imports into Marketing Cloud, and we won't do it through this import method. I'll show you a different one. But for now, it's going to go ahead and start to import that process. So we'll go Done. It's going to go ahead and import. And we can go back into our Records tab here and see if it's refreshed. It hasn't done it just yet, but we can refresh it by going back into our data extensions here, and we can navigate back to our folder. So let's try it. We'll go Contact Builder. Or even better, I'll just press F5 and refresh this page, and hopefully we'll find those records have gone in. Perfect, and the file's now completed, and we can see all 13 records have imported. I'll go to my sample rows and navigate to my Records tab in Contact Builder, and hopefully there is all 13. Perfect. Now of course we could do a very similar process to upload from the FTP. Once again we can click on the Import button. You can choose the first option to import a file right now as a single process. Go OK. And rather than choosing to upload a file from our desktop, we could have chosen to upload from a location. Now again, very importantly, the location it defaults to is the import folder in your FTP for Marketing Cloud. So make sure that you do have the file in your import folder, and of course the file name, make sure it's also the correct format. So it was sample rows.csv with all the correct casing, comma delimited, and of course the English Australia date format. And what I'll do though, is I will choose the wrong name once more. I'll put 2 S's for sample rows, and we'll try and see what happens. If I go Next, it's going to say, nope, sorry, couldn't find that file. If I type the name in correctly and go Next, it should say, yes, I found the file. Let's now map up those fields. So there you go. You can upload things manually from your desktop or from the FTP using the Contact Builder method. And for our third and final way to import data into Marketing Cloud, we're going to use Automation Studio. And to get here, again, we can navigate to our app selector up the top and move all the way across to Journey Builder and then Automation Studio. Now, once we're here, I'm of course in the overview screen in Automations, and I can choose to create myself a brand new automation. So I'll go new automation, just like that. I can start to build out what this file import could look like. Now, the first thing I have to do, of course, is build in how this information will trigger. I want to run this automation as a one-time test, so I'm just going to say schedule for now as my test. And of course, my activity is to then drag into my automation. I'm just going to upload a file from the import directory, so I can use the import file activity here, drag and drop onto our canvas, and there it is. Our very first and only step is to import that file. Now I can choose a definition of how to import the file by clicking the choose button, but of course we don't have an import definition created to import this file. We could have created it previously on the previous contact builder step, but I recommend using this one as it's a better interface for it. So I can choose to create a brand new import definition by clicking this top right hand side button here to create a new import definition. I'll call this one my sample rows as one word, sample rows.csv FTP import, as I want to import this from my FTP. Now I'll leave a description and other things as it is, and I'll go next. Now I could of course put a notification here if I want to let someone know if the import has successfully imported or failed, but I'll leave that one as blank for now, and I'll go next. And to import the file, it's going to go straight to our FTP file locations. Now by default, your exact target enhanced FTP file location is the import folder, which is lucky for us, that's where our file is. So you can see my file name here, it wants us to type in the file naming pattern to import. So I'm going to straight away go and copy my sample rows.csv. I'm going to copy that file name and paste it straight in, and then click off that text box, and it says, perfect, we found a file that's going to match that file import pattern. Next I can choose the date format. Now once again, I have got this file using the Australian date format, so we are going to have to navigate down and do our English Australia import. It is a comma delimited field. We do not have double quotes to worry about, and we will skip some bad data if there is any. For the advanced file options, there's nothing here we want to change. We don't want to skip if it was imported more recently. We don't want to skip if things have failed, or have any system buffers for hours either. We're going to leave all that as it is and just go next. On our destination, we can now choose where to upload the file to. Now once again, we can navigate in our data extensions to the folder we want to import to. We can see straight away my public folder has that one data extension I've created called sample rows, which I've cleaned out. There's no current records in there, so it's ready to import to. So click on it once, it goes blue, and the selected data extension is our sample rows data extension. We then click on next. Now our next field here is our mapping screen. Now once again, we have those four options: add, update, add and update, or just overwrite. Now again, because we are replacing all the existing data, we could choose to overwrite. If we were deltering in or producing daily updates, we may want to choose the add and update option. But for now, overwrite's just fine, so we'll choose overwrite. Now, we do have, and we do know, that the file has the correct header naming convention to match our data extension, so we can leave it as mapped by header row. If we don't know that's the case, or if we know for a fact that the header names in the file do not match the data extension, we may have to choose the ordinal if we recreated those file headers in exactly the same order, or we may have to choose them mapped manually. The problem here is that we do have to upload a sample file to show those headers. Now that does mean if you do have a very, very large file, you will have to get a smaller subset of that file to upload to show those headers. What I can do is I can choose to upload my small file on my desktop just like this and go open, and then Marketing Cloud's going to say, okay, sure, these are the headers that you've told me exist in this sample file, which I'll use to replicate in the larger file from the FTP. So for those of you out there who have a very, very large customer data set or business data set you have to upload from your FTP, talk to your database admin, get a small subset of data, just maybe 10 or 100 rows, and then you can use that smaller set to upload as your sample file, to then use the mapping function here. So quite easily I can drag and drop my ID onto ID, which maps those two. I can drag and drop my email onto email, my email opt-in onto opt-in, my join date to join date, first name to first name, and role to role. Now again, of course, if you're doing a very, very large import with a lot of files and a lot of fields, you may want to make sure the naming convention is the same, so you can default to the map by header row. But for these 6 fields I've done today, as you can see, it's quite quick and easy. With that all done, I can click on next and view our summary. Here is our mapping conditions, ID to ID, email to email. Yep, all looking good. Everything else here looks good, so we're going to go on finish. And that is our import definition set up. So with that done, I can save my automation here. I'm going to call this one my sample rows automation. Sample rows import. Do the naming convention there, import automation, and go done. And now I can save my automation. And by saving the automation with this one activity inside of it, I can now run once this activity to see if it works. So I'll go run once. I'll choose to run this one activity, and I'll choose run. Should I tell someone if it fails or succeeds? No, we're going to watch it ourselves, so let's just go run now to see how it goes. We can see that our automation has now started. Now it may take a few seconds to kick off into our activity tab here. We can refresh with this button here, and then we'll see hopefully soon the automation has started. And after just a few seconds, we can now see the automation has kicked off. Our one activity has started running. We hover over it, it is running right now. So hopefully in a couple of seconds time, done. 11 seconds, perfect. So I could now navigate back from my Automation Studio, back into our Email Studio. I can navigate back over to my data extensions by going up my top tab here, subscribers and data extensions, and go and find that data extension in my public folder, and hopefully 13 records, perfect. So we have now uploaded those 13 records through the Automation Studio way, that third way today. Check all 13 are there and looking good, no gaps at all. So there we have 3 different ways that you can choose to import your data, either from the desktop or from the FTP, into a data extension in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. If you want some more exposure on how to create some automated data processes from the FTP into data extensions, there's another video you can check out, which I'll link in the description below. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and have now got some understanding of how to upload your data into Marketing Cloud. If you have enjoyed it, then please let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you are notified when I release more Salesforce Marketing Cloud content.